welcome to the starting line. Today we're in conversation with Sue Peachey. Some of you will remember Sue from the film People versus Climate Change. So Sue, why don't you tell us a little bit to start with about yourself and about how you got involved in People versus Climate Change.
Well, I got invited by, I received an invitation from the House of Commons back in November 2019. They sent out 30,000 random invitations to households in the UK. And I said yes.
That's to join the Citizens' Assembly, right?
Yeah, that was to join the UK Citizens' Assembly.
Yeah.
And it was based over 4 weekends, or it was meant to be based over 4 weekends last year. So I sort of volunteered for that.
But why did you do that? I mean, did you have a background in climate activism?
No, not at all. The reason, I think when I realised the uniqueness of the invitation, I almost looked upon it as like doing jury service, because I realised that 30,000 invitations, and they only wanted 110 people originally, and there's 66 million people living in the UK. To be one of those 110 people was quite a unique experience, and to even get one of the invitations was really unique. So yeah. I sort of looked upon it as like, oh my God, I've been randomly chosen to do this task. Surely the right thing to do would be to put your name forward and say, obviously there were people that probably couldn't do it, but I was in a position that I could give that time. So I thought, yeah, I'm going to do it. I don't know nothing about climate change, but I was willing to go and learn. And I did it really, not really for me, but for all my nieces and nephews and my step-grandchildren and people like that it's not really going to affect me in 30 years' time, probably won't be here, but it will definitely affect them and their children. So that was my reasoning behind getting involved in it.
So it's really a sort of public. I think the analogy of jury service is a really good one, right? It's something that you kind of know that everyone's supposed to do at some point, but it doesn't happen very often. But when you're called on, it's a responsibility. Did you? So it sounds like you had thought a bit about, given the way you just framed that as like not so much. I mean, you and I are the same generation, right? So 30 years, you're right. It's really about our nephews and nieces and grandchildren and children. How much had you thought about climate change before you got that invitation, and what was your awareness?
Not a lot, really. To me, climate change was just 2 words: climate and change. I didn't recognise, what it really meant or what it entailed, what the consequences were. I didn't really know. I didn't really take a lot of notice.
But you must have had a sense. You must have had a sense that there was something kind of important going on.
Yeah.
But you just hadn't ever got into the details.
Yeah, because like you see things about climate change, but I mean, I wouldn't choose to watch a documentary about climate change at that particular time.
Right.
So I suppose I was very uneducated about the realities of what climate change was. So I thought, and you're never too old to learn.
So tell us a bit about that learning process that you went through in those 4 weekends. Just what was it like? Was it just to paint a picture of the learning process? Maybe start with for you personally, and then the collective of the Citizens' Assembly. Okay.
Well, for me personally, it really all began on the very first weekend that we went to Birmingham. We were lucky enough to have Sir David Attenborough come and talk to us. And obviously, if you're going to listen to somebody about climate change, he's the man. Mm-hmm. So the fact that he came and actually said thank you for taking the time out to come and do this, you think, it must be, we're doing something really worthwhile. And then the first day we listened to lots of different scientists and people that knew everything about what climate change, and they basically told us then I understood personally myself what climate change actually was, and what you know, what the consequences of not doing anything about it was. So I think the very first weekend, I sort of had a, oh my God, you know, this is a real thing, with all the graphs and all the scientific. I think the one thing for me was the Oxford temperature change chart. I think it really, you know, brings it home what the difference has been over the last 100 odd years. And you can quite clearly see that it's definitely, we're just definitely warming up over the last 50 years. And it's visually a good indication to see that. So yeah, so once I realized it was important and that, you know, that this thing was really going to happen, then we sort of knuckled down and started, we were given questions of how are we going to, you know, sort out this or sort out that. Transport, we did surface transport, then we did aviation. We were split into a couple of groups and I was on the transport group. So over the next couple of weeks, we were given tasks of, we'd be given a question and then we'd be told information about that particular subject. Then we'd be in a little group of 8 people on a table and then we'd discuss things and come up with ideas of what we thought as normal people. And, you know, because that's what everybody was, just like me. Some people are a bit more knowledgeable about climate change, you know, but that's why it was a good demographic of what the UK population was all about.
The first thing that's interesting to me is you say that basically in one day of like concentrated, okay, albeit the very best. I mean, we've been listening to David Attenborough all our lives, and he's been amazing. I remember that first Life on Earth series when we were teenagers, right? But in one day, you've had enough input for a sort of light bulb, like, right, I understand this enough to know it's really serious and we've got to act.
Yeah.
Which speaks to the importance of I mean, there's a lot of young people now calling for around the world for climate change to be in the curriculum. But tell us a bit about the dynamic, because what sort of things did you find it easy to agree on, and what sort of things, you know, as a mixed demographic, as you say, did you find yourselves not agreeing on or arguing about even?
Well, I don't think we really argued, but there were the aviation thing was a real issue with you know, because I think most people go on holiday abroad, and obviously some people go on holiday more than others. People live in this country now and that have family in other countries, you know, so it was a real sort of thing, and it was trying to be fair to everybody about how we were going to, you know, because obviously aviation is one of the biggest, well, you know, it's a big percentage of the problem. So yeah, there was a few, you know, different opinions
about whether, because of course there's different ways of decarbonising aviation. One is to reduce the amount of flying, which I guess is the content. I mean, we see now the first electric planes and sustainable aviation fuel. But you're actually talking about limiting the amount of flying that people do, or we talk about increasing the flight tax.
Yeah, increasing the, you know, like the personal flight tax, you know, the more you fly, the more tax you pay.
It's interesting how even you get with people with very different points of view, fairness is often something that, you know, it can bring people together, and okay, you can argue about the details, but
I mean, that's the thing, if you've got to make a decision, and you've got to come up with a solution, you know, you have to make sacrifices. Everybody does. And that's the thing I don't think people realise is, you know, we've all got to make sacrifices, and we've all got to slightly change the way that we live our lives.
What have been the biggest changes that the experience triggered for you?
Well, the first thing I did is I bought an electric car, a second-hand one. I mean, I was sort of thinking about changing my car, but after learning everything that I did about, you know, I thought, well, you know, let's buy an electric car, and then it's a talking point, and it's, you know, I am going to be doing that as the biggest thing that I can do to, you know, reduce my carbon footprint would be to buy an electric car. And I love it, by the way. It's brilliant, and I recommend it to everybody.
And
you know,
and has it been a talking point? I mean, what do your friends think about that?
Oh yeah. I mean, a lot of people have never even been in an electric car, and it's, you know, like you grew up like me, like watching Space 1999 and things like that. I thought we'd be living on the moon by this day and age. So to be driving around in an electric car, which is like really smooth and, you know, and it's really good. And the fact that you're saving the planet as well is even better. Politicians and everybody, they're all telling us how to change, or they're telling us we have to change, but they don't tell us why we, you know, there's no explanation probably. And I think like having the Citizens Assembly, you've got a group of people, like I said, I didn't really know anything about it. I was sat in front of the people and I had to learn. So it's all about education. You know, years ago, and like I always talk about this, is we used to have public information adverts, which like we have party political broadcast, where they're on all the channels, and you know, we all got to sit and watch them. And I bet you can remember, oh, it's a nice day, Petunia, there's a man waving, and you know, there's a boat sinking. So if they could do something like that to, you know, about climate change and about any other issues, I mean, it's all right asking us to change as normal people, but they need to explain why we're expected to change and the consequences of if we don't change. So I think the normal people would go along with it if they knew more.
Yeah, you remind me that in those because you and I are contemporaries. When we were kids, there were only 3 channels, right? So the government could say you're all going to. Now we have too many channels, but there'll be a modern way of doing that via social media and stuff, right?
Mainstream television. You could put those, you know, and you could probably put those adverts on, I don't know, on social media and things like that. But you know, like even if it was in a sort of like they were light-hearted ways of making people realise the importance of a subject. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes humour is a better way of getting people to sit and, you know, and listen.
Well, yeah, I mean, you certainly use humour quite a lot. I know from the film. I think you're right. You don't, even if it's the most deadly serious subject in the world, it doesn't mean you can't. I mean, often people are more open when they're having fun, right? They're not, you know, because they're sort of open to new ideas. Look, you said earlier that one of your reasons for doing it was thinking about future generations in your own family and more broadly. You know, now that you've been woken up by the process, you know, you can't undo the awareness that you've got, right? What, you know, and you see all the news around the world of, you know, floods and fires and hurricanes. How do you feel about the future? How do you talk to those, you know, next generations in your family about the future?
Yeah, well, I think the younger generation, when they're at school at the moment, they're learning all about it, is the people of my generation that I think we need to convince more. I think the younger generations have learned about it at schools, whereas our generation probably haven't, because, you know, we were given information about how to shelter yourself from a nuclear bomb when, you know, that was the in thing in the 70s. Right. So I'm optimistic that people will learn. And I think definitely the last few weeks, more people are talking about it that wouldn't necessarily have talked about it because they've seen the consequences of the floods and the fires. But it's making them realise that, you know, everybody looks at it and thinks, oh, that was terrible there, or that was terrible there. But it's getting the connection. Like I said, climate change is 2 words. You need to connect the 2 together and understand what the consequences are. And that's if we can do that and get everybody, because I mean, even the people that are running these big companies and people in government, at the end of the day, they're just people. And, you know, they need to have the knowledge to know how things are going to work and how things are going to pan out.
Yeah, I mean, certainly in my work, I totally agree. You know, it doesn't matter if you're a president or a CEO, you're still someone's son or daughter, right? And you're often someone's mum or dad. And I do know that one of the most powerful questions in the world is the teenager asking their mum or dad who runs a big company what they're doing about climate change, right? You can hide from your shareholders, but you can't hide from your kids, right? Exactly. But one thing I notice is, I'm really interested in your advice on how to get over this, is some parts of the press tend to really focus on, it almost feels to me like they don't want change. They're focusing on, it's going to, the government's going to force everyone to buy an electric car, or the government's going to force everyone to buy a more expensive boiler. And, we know that at the early stage technologies, buying a new electric car is still more expensive, but we also know that it's getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And in a few years, new electric cars will be cheaper than new. Same thing will happen with boilers, right? How do we handle that? Why is that going on in the press? Why is this? Is it just, what's happening? Because that affects the way a lot of people think about it. And that, we're going to have to pay more money. How do we deal with that?
I only bought a second-hand electric car, but I was lucky that I could afford to buy that. Everybody's in a different position. We still got millions of people living in poverty in this country, but I think everybody can do what they can do, what their budget allows them to do. And I'm sure, and I'm 100% sure that there are people that are probably, let's say they're trying to do their bit because maybe, for instance, they're a vegan, which is, they're helping climate change, but they're driving around in a 4x4 that's a diesel, with a 5-litre engine.
Yeah.
So, what's worse? Obviously the car.
Yeah.
But there are people out there that can do more than others because they can afford to.
Or can do it.
A little bit of change.
Yeah, or can do it sooner, right? Because they can afford to. Because again, that's one thing I don't think. I like your point about the sort of public information, or public advertisement. Because one thing I think we don't talk enough about is the fact that things, look, we've seen it. Wind power's got a lot cheaper. Solar power's got a lot cheaper. Batteries are getting a lot cheaper. Electric cars are getting a lot cheaper. So, new types of boilers will get a lot cheaper. So yes, they might be really expensive now, but with the right policy and the right incentives, and maybe a bit of, like, you still get, with a bit of government support for the first people, so that, industry gets used to doing it and the costs come down. So we tell a story not of, it's all got to change tomorrow. It's urgent, but 5 years is a long time, right? We can change a lot in 5 years.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm sure in the next 5 years, things are, even since I bought my car last year, I've noticed a massive change in the electric car industry because there's more choice.
Yeah.
And I think 85% of the new cars that are bought are all bought on PCP. So it is more achievable for people to
just explain to everybody what PCP means. Who might not know
it's personal contract payment, I believe. So it's almost like you're leasing the vehicle, so you're paying so much a month rather than actually forking out the whole amount of money.
So you commit to like 3 year repayment.
You buy it and then you buy it. And the more people that do that, then the more that they're going to be in the second-hand market in 2 or 3 years' time.
Yeah.
So and then it becomes more affordable for the people that probably can't afford to, buy a new one on PCP, or they want to buy a second-hand car. And the technology is in electric cars, and their capabilities on the range and everything is improving
all the time.
All the time. So, I know that people have still got issues, and there always will be internal combustion engine cars because there's always going to be classic cars, and there's always
it's like there are, I say that, so it's like there are rallies for steamrollers which run on coal, right? And they'll probably there'll be the same thing first. There'll be in 50 years there'll be rallies for those old dirty combustion engine cars, whatever. Yeah. The Citizens Assembly, it was only 4 days, right? 4 weekends. So it was a relatively short period of time. But you came up with a set of recommendations. How do you track what's happening to those recommendations?
Well, the report went to Parliament last September.
Yeah.
And I think the select committee's already sort of adopted some of the things that we've suggested. And we've actually got a reunion in September in London. So a lot of the Citizens Assembly members we're all meeting up. Hopefully going to go to Parliament, and we're going to find out how much they've actually listened to what we've done. and
Right.
hopefully we'll get a good bit of feedback on that. I mean,
Great.
obviously it was a bit of a bad time, you know, global pandemic and all that. Obviously they've had different priorities, which is understandable, but you know, we'll definitely find out next month.
Good, because it would be nice to see the scorecard, wouldn't it, of recommendations, you know, what have been adopted in full, what have not been adopted at all, what some there might be an alternative policy which gets the same effect, you know. You started by saying that the reason you said yes to that invitation out of the blue was a sense of sort of civic duty, like jury service. So it's a double question. One, what would you say to anyone anywhere in the world who gets an invitation to join a citizens' assembly? First question. And second question, if you had to launch a citizens' assembly on another topic now, what would it be?
Well, if somebody was lucky enough, because I would say it was luck to get one of those invitations, and you're willing to learn and you've got the time, do it, because it's a worthwhile thing that you can make a difference. And you know, hopefully we didn't waste our time discussing everything we did. You know, things are changing and you're part of that big change.
Yeah.
And if I was to have citizens' assembly, let's get people out of poverty.
Right.
You know, how are we going to bring everybody up a level? Because
another very big. Sue, I know we're at the end of time. Thank you. It's really fun and informative talking to you. I love the way you bring your light touch to, but you've got this big heart and very, you know, like the fact that I love the way you see it as an honour to have been asked.
Yeah.
As a matter of civic duty, and then your response to that last question, you know, that if we're going to have another citizens' assembly, let's make it on poverty. And of course, we know that climate and poverty are linked. It is those who, you know, in our own communities and in the world, who are the poorest, who've done the least to cause climate change, and are always the ones most exposed to it. So, you know, certainly in my role, as I've increasingly have this global role, and I'm going to be working a lot in Africa next year. I'm increasingly aware of these really kind of ugly. I mean, gap is not chasms, and so I think that in order for us to tackle climate change, we are also going to have to tackle inequity and poverty. So it's really inspiring that you see that as the next topic. So, thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you for being you know, a voice for ordinary people to and demonstrating the power of education, actually, and how a power of education and the importance of civic service and what some people call participatory democracy, which sometimes I think we've lost, right? That ordinary people participating in the complex processes like juries or climate change policy can learn enough to and can grapple with the complexity to be really, really constructive partners in finding a way forward. So thank you so much.
I do my best, Nigel. I do my best.
Well, keep it up, and we'll see you around. Thanks a lot, Sue. Take care. Bye-bye.